Thank you so much, St. John's Choir. Chris has been very honored by your presence, and on very short notice you were able to come and sing a powerful song on heaven. It was May of 2007 that my publisher met with me and asked me to write a book on heaven and the afterlife. I consented with great excitement to do that. A few days later, received word that my wife had cancer, a very serious form of cancer. My publisher, much younger than me, received word that his wife had cancer and threw the project really way on the back burner as I took off the next 8 months to care for my wife. He took off the next 6 months from work. When we came back from those experiences where we'd been forced to look at very serious disease in part of our lives, we were changed persons. We were much better equipped to talk about writing a book that deals with understanding of the afterlife, because there are certain life experiences that fine-tune your understanding of what is to come hereafter. You've already heard it referred to that on July the 5th, 4th of July weekend, July 5th, Sunday night, Chris and his sisters, his brothers, were gathered together at a campfire down the lake. As I had sent the book, Heaven and the Afterlife, it just came out last week in the stores, but I had sent the book ahead to my brother and his family. Megan had read it, so it sparked a conversation, and it's in the scope of that Chris began discussing, as all of them did, how would they want to be remembered? How would they want their funerals to be? And that's why we're so immensely grateful for the gospel choir that could be here, because that was part of Chris's request. There's a lot of things I could talk to you about on this occasion. One would be to talk about why is it that bad things happen to good people. That would be a legitimate topic to talk about. Bill and Lori are not strangers to tragic situations. And Lori's family growing up, five siblings, 5 children in her family. Wally, because of a motorcycle accident, died at 15. Ryan died at age 6 in a tragic accident on the farm. On Bill's side of the family, Janie never reached her first birthday. And Bill's twin, Bob, never reached his 20th birthday in the plane crash that occurred a short distance from Manhattan, from the White City, Kansas area. So it would be possible to talk about that topic, but our sensing was, given the dynamic of what had unfolded and Chris's conversation with his brothers and sisters, it might be appropriate for us to talk a little bit about heaven right now. If I could, I'd like to talk about and coach us all about the kind of things that I would encourage us not to say to the family. I have violated this myself many times in the past, and it's only been in the recent years, in the particular family crisis that we find ourselves in, a battle with cancer, that I have realized what needs to be said to families and what should not be said to families. Our inclination is, and I've done it many times, is to say to people, how are you? How are you? That's very hard on a family to answer that over and over. And rather than have Bill and Laura and other members of the family answer that question, it is best just to say to them, I'm praying for you. I'm thinking of you. Rather than evoke them into a situation where they need to report over and over how it's very hard for families. So you'll know to be sensitive. Many of us as Garlows are from San Diego now, though our roots are here. And so I'm so grateful for this church and this community that loves my brother and my sister-in-law and their family. And the way you minister to them is so profoundly encouraging us. Many of Lori's family are in Kansas City and Washington State and North Dakota, so they likewise are scattered. So we have relied on you and continue to rely on you as a church and as a local community to continue to minister. But this little bit of coaching is helpful for us all. A second thing I want to coach you on, and I learned this in the last 2 years. I realized how many times in a moment of crisis I turned to someone and had said to them, if there's anything I can do to help you, let me know. We always say that, and we do mean it. The problem is the person in the midst of crisis is too overwhelmed to respond to that. And they don't know the extent to which they can or should not ask. And so it's best in those moments, rather than say, if there's anything I can do, I help you, instead say, who is the one you delegated to kind of organize things in your life during this moment of tragedy? I want to tell them the specific things that I'm able to do for you and your family during this season. It takes the pressure off of the family. It was just a few days ago, several weeks ago actually, Michael Jackson died, and it was appalling to me that the coverage dealt with only 3 things. What a great entertainer he was, and certainly he was. They dealt specifically with the kind of drugs that may have taken him out, and certainly that is a legitimate question. And then they talked about some of his legal problems of the past. What amazed me, after 3 weeks now of incessant coverage, not one reporter that I know of covered the most important question. And that question is, what is death? What about death? Michael Jackson is gone. Wouldn't it have been good for someone to have talked about how we can live our lives in such a way to prepare for this ultimate that it is a 100% statistic reality. That every single one of us, given enough time, we will likewise die. And the fact is that Pastor Doug and I, as we went through our graduate education, undergraduate education, we're religion majors, and I have a number of degrees, and so does he. I suspect the same as you, the same for me. When it occurred to me, in the midst of writing the book on heaven and the afterlife, it occurred to me for the first time, there was not a single course that I had ever taken on the subject of heaven. And yet, we talk about that's where we're going to go someday, and that's where we're going to invest all of the rest of our life, which is very long. Remarkably, not only did I not take a course on heaven, I don't think there was one offered. On top of that, I did not hear a single one-hour lecture on the topic of heaven. How is it possible that with such a short time here, whether it's 21 years or whether it's 91 years, it's still short. How is it possible that we could invest so much energy into here and now and miss the place that we're going to be forever, or that we long to be forever? All of us want to be there. God designed heaven for people. He didn't design hell for people. He designed, quite frankly, hell only for demons and angels. But we have a choice. We have a choice. God never sent anyone to hell. People may choose to send themselves there. God never chose that. He chooses heaven. He wants us to make decisions in such a way that would take us to that place. What happens when one is prepared to die, as Christopher was? What happens that moment after death? It's not soul sleep. You're very alert. You're very alive. You're very conscious of those around you. You have the capacity to communicate. Luke 16 gives us a clear example of even the conversation that takes place on that particular occasion. Jesus spoke to a thief on the cross dying with him. He said, this day, you're going to be with me in paradise. Paul spoke openly. He said, I'm torn in my body. He said, I really want to stay here and work with you guys, but I really want to be over there. I want to go over the other side because I can be with Christ so much more than I am right now. In other words, in that moment that you die, you are with Christ. Assuming you're prepared to die, as Christopher was, then you go to that wonderful place called heaven. Luke speaks openly of the kind of awareness we have at that time. Don't picture some sort of a soul or a spirit floating around in an ethereal-like fashion out in space. God did not design us that way. He never made us that way. That imagery of heaven is false, and it's not rooted at all. And the only source we have about this, and that's the Scriptures themselves. That's the Bible itself. After we die, we will have some form, I believe, initially, even some physical form. Not our full permanent glorified body yet, but some form, physicality, some physical form. Why is that? Why do we know that? Because we have glimpses of that in the person of Moses. We have glimpses of that in the person of Elijah. There'll be a consciousness. There'll be a bodily type of existence. Once again, we will not yet have received our permanent glorified body, but there will be a form somewhat similar, recognizable to each other, even in the moments immediately following death. Paul spoke of it this way in the New Testament. I get rid of my earthly tent. That was his way of referring to the body we have here. He said, I'll get rid of that earthly tent. He says, now I will be groaning for my permanent body, but all indicators are that we'll be quite recognizable in some bodily form, based upon those who have visited us, Jesus himself being the classic example. In fact, Paul's whole teaching was that Jesus is, and he called him an agricultural term, first fruits. First fruits is a way of saying, here's the first crop that comes in. That means there's more to follow. Paul is saying in effect like this, take a look at Jesus, and whatever we saw in Jesus, that's what's coming for us. That's why Jesus' physical, literal, bodily resurrection is so important. Jesus